Let me ask you something. If nothing happened in Varginha, Brazil, why are people still talking about it nearly 30 years later? Why are witnesses still standing by what they saw? Why did medical testimony surface decades after the fact instead of disappearing? And why has this case just been dragged back into the spotlight now? Because most UFO stories don't survive time. They fade, they collapse, and they quietly disappear. Varginha didn't. It did the opposite. Tonight, I'm not asking you to believe in aliens. I'm not here to sensationalize witnesses. And I'm not going to start with the creature, because that's where most people lose the thread. Instead, I'm going to walk through this case in the exact order it unfolded, because sequence is where the truth hides. We're going to start with a craft that multiple people say was already damaged in the sky. We're going to talk about a material that behaves like nothing we can manufacture. We're going to move into injured non-human beings, a hospital encounter, and a military response that may not have ended in Brazil. And by the end of this, whether you're skeptical or convinced, you'll understand why Varginha is called Brazil's Roswell, and why that comparison might be far more literal than anyone is comfortable admitting. Before we go any further, keep one question in the back of your mind. If this was all a misunderstanding, why does it behave exactly like a crash retrieval? If you really want to understand Varginha, you have to forget the creature for the moment. The story doesn't begin on the ground, it begins above the town. In the days leading up to January 20, 1996, people in and around Varginha weren't talking about aliens. They were talking about something flying low, something that didn't look right. This wasn't a light streaking across the sky. It wasn't performing impossible maneuvers. Witnesses described an object that looked unstable, as if it was compensating for damage. One person later said it looked torn, almost like something had failed mid-flight. That detail matters, because there's a difference between something falling and something fighting to stay airborne. This wasn't a clean descent. It was a struggle, and that struggle is the first domino in this entire case. Ask yourself this quietly. If nothing crashed, why does this already sound like a failure in progress? Not long after reports of the object in distress, the focus shifts to the ground. This is where most people think the story begins. It doesn't. 3 young girls encounter something near a vacant lot. One of them has stood by her account for decades. What they describe doesn't sound theatrical or dramatic. It sounds confused. A small being, large striking eyes, skin that appeared shiny, almost oily, a posture that suggested weakness rather than a threat. Whatever they saw didn't look powerful. It looked injured. And here's the detail that reframes everything. These sightings didn't come first. They came after the reports of the craft in trouble. These weren't beings appearing at random. These were beings appearing after something had already gone wrong. If you're still with me here, this is where the story tightens instead of falling apart. As the story spread, other witnesses came forward. Some claimed they didn't just see a craft, they saw debris. And what they said about that debris is one of the most important details in this entire case. They described material that was incredibly light, metallic, but not rigid, thin, almost like foil. You could crumple it up in your hand, and when you let it go, it wouldn't stay crushed. It would flatten itself back out again, as if it remembered the shape it was supposed to have. Pause there for a second, because almost 50 years earlier, at the Roswell crash site, Major Jesse Marcel described the exact same thing. He said the debris he handled couldn't be crushed and would immediately return to its original form. No creases or no permanent damage. Different country, different decade, same impossible material. Stories don't usually carry precise technical details across continents and generations. Myths blur. This didn't. Once the craft is no longer in the sky and the beings are on the ground, the story escalates again. Witnesses describe the entities as weak and disorientated. Some accounts say at least one was captured alive. Others say bodies were later recovered. This is where the hospital enters the narrative. For years, people claimed a non-human being was taken to a medical facility in Varginha. At first, this sounded like the point where the story went too far. Then, decades later, a medical professional came forward and said he examined something that was not human. He didn't describe excitement. He described fear. Fear of ridicule. Fear of professional ruin. Fear of being turned into a joke. And this is the moment the case stops being Brazilian and becomes international. You don't have to believe him, but you do have to understand why it matters. People lie for attention. They rarely lie to erase their credibility. According to accounts that have followed this case for decades, the being didn't survive. And this is where the story takes its most controversial turn. Multiple sources claim that after the medical involvement, the situation escalated beyond Brazilian authorities. The Brazilian military is said to have secured the area and handled initial containment. But the belief that refuses to go away is that the final removal of the non-human being did not end in Brazil. The belief is that the United States military became involved. This belief has followed the case everywhere it's gone, and no one in a position to deny it ever has. The claim is that the body, or bodies, were transferred out of Brazil and taken to an undisclosed location in the United States. No public records, no confirmation, just silence. Ask yourself this honestly. If a non-human entity were recovered, even in a compromised state, would it really be treated as a local issue? Or would it instantly become a global intelligence priority? This is why the work of James Fox matters. Fox didn't revive Varginha for spectacle. He spent years focusing on cases that sit right on the edge between official denial and unresolved testimony. His updated documentary work and decision to bring Varginha back into formal press settings isn't about claiming certainty. It's about pressure. If this case were truly settled, it wouldn't need silence. It wouldn't need dismissal. It would have collapsed under scrutiny. Instead, it gained witnesses. It gained medical testimony. It gained relevance. That's not how false stories behave. Witnesses describe a rapid, controlled military presence. Vehicles appearing quickly, areas restricted, conversations shut down. And then the silence lasted decades. If something unknown crashed, involved advanced technology, and included biological entities that didn't belong to any known country, this is exactly how the response would look. And if the official explanation were correct, none of this would be necessary. You don't need secrecy for confusion. You don't need international involvement for misunderstanding. You don't need 30 years of silence for a mistake. When you strip Varginha down to its core, it doesn't feel like a story that grew out of control. It feels like a story that leaked. The craft in distress matters. The foil-like self-restoring material matters. The timing of the beings matters. The hospital matters. And the belief that the US military ultimately took possession matters. Because when you line Varginha up next to Roswell, the similarities stop feeling accidental. They start feeling procedural. Now let's take a look at our viewer poll for this episode. What do you think keeps the Varginha case alive? Is it the craft in distress? The impossible material? The injured beings? Or is it the hospital testimony? Vote in the poll and read the comments. I'll be there and answering every single one of them. This is where the question changes. It stops being, do you believe in this? And becomes, why does this keep happening? Because the next cases we're heading into, Roswell, the Ariel School, Rendlesham, and in Australia, Westfall, don't soften this picture. They sharpen it. And Roswell is where the pattern begins. I'm Mike. I'll see you next time. Stay curious and make sure you share what you know with those that are happy to listen. Bye for now.